AITA for exposing my parents after they drained my college fund and took out a loan in my name? I'm Luna, 32, and I'm the daughter in my family who was praised for being independent. Right up until independence meant I stopped letting them use me. My older brother Adrian is 36. In my family, his mistakes were pressure. Mine were character flaws. If Adrian forgot an assignment, Dad said he had too much on his plate. If I got an A-, Dad wanted to know what distracted me. When Adrian dropped a class, Mom brought him takeout and told him one bad semester didn't define him. When I came home exhausted after finals, she told me I had always been dramatic about school. Adrian got a newer, used car when he started college because, according to Dad, his path is expensive, but it's going somewhere. I was told to coordinate rides with friends. When I pointed out that my campus was farther away, Mom smiled in that soft, patient way she used when she wanted to make me feel childish. Girls are naturally more resilient, she said. Don't turn that into a complaint. That was Celeste, my mother. She could say something cruel in the same voice another person might use to offer tea. My father, Robert, preferred directness. He talked about legacy, the family name, and Adrian's future, as if the rest of us were supporting characters in a biography he had already written. For years, I thought I was simply less needy than my brother. That was the story they gave me, and I wore it like a compliment. I learned to make one grocery run last 2 weeks. I saved campus bookstore receipts, tuition statements, scholarship emails, and every letter connected to financial aid in an old shoebox. Paper felt safer than promises. I didn't know then how right I was to keep it. The first time I understood that my parents hadn't merely favored Adrian but had made an actual decision against me, I was 18 and sitting at the kitchen table with a tuition estimate in front of me. Dad was opening mail with a small silver letter opener. Mom was sorting coupons she would later forget to use. I had been accepted into a 4-year program, but I had also completed enough early credits that I could reduce the cost if I planned carefully. I had a partial scholarship. I had filled out the FAFSA. I had printed the numbers because Dad always claimed I spoke in vague feelings instead of facts. I need to know how much is in the college fund, I said. Dad didn't look up. We'll discuss it. The payment deadline is in 3 weeks. We'll discuss it, he repeated. I'm trying to make a plan. That got his attention. He set the letter opener down. There is no fund for you anymore. I stared at him because the sentence didn't make sense at first. My parents had talked about college savings since I was a child. Not often, but often enough that I knew it existed. Birthday checks from relatives had supposedly gone into it. So had part of a small inheritance from my grandmother. What do you mean there is no fund? Life changed, Mom said. She didn't look surprised. That was the part that made my stomach drop. Dad folded his hands in front of him. Your brother had expenses we didn't anticipate. What expenses? Tuition, housing, transportation, things that mattered. I looked from him to Mom. You used my college money for Adrian? Dad's jaw tightened. We invested in the child whose program required it, he said. You have scholarships. You have options. I have a partial scholarship. You're smart. You'll figure out the rest. So that was the plan? Take everything and not tell me until I asked. Mom sighed like I had made the conversation exhausting. Luna, don't make every inconvenience about yourself. Inconvenience. You were always stronger than your brother. Dad leaned back in his chair. A daughter doesn't need to bury herself in debt, trying to compete with her brother. I'm not competing. I'm asking about the fund you told me existed. And we're telling you life changed, Mom said. I remember staring down at the tuition estimate. I had highlighted the payment deadline in yellow. The ink had bled slightly through the page. Then Dad said the sentence I would hear in my head for years. A smart girl still ends up someone's wife. Adrian is building the family's future. I didn't yell. I wish I could say that was because I was strategic even then, but really I was stunned. I gathered the papers from the table and went to my room. 10 minutes later, Mom came in without knocking. You know your father loves you, she said. I was sitting on the floor beside my bed, surrounded by scholarship forms. He has a strange way of showing it. He is under pressure. So am I. This attitude is what worries us. I looked up at her. What attitude? The way you keep score. That became the official explanation for everything after that. I kept score. I held grudges. I was sensitive about money. No one mentioned that the score existed because they had assigned different values to their children. I enrolled at community college for the first part of my degree because the transfer credits were cheaper. I applied for every scholarship I could find, including 2 that required essays about resilience, which felt almost insulting. I rented textbooks when possible and bought used copies full of someone else's highlighting when I couldn't. Some nights I sat on the floor with my laptop plugged into a loose wall outlet, watching the tuition portal count down to a deadline while I moved money between accounts in amounts so small they looked ridiculous. $200 from a scholarship refund. $86 I had saved by returning a textbook before the rental deadline. $40 from a birthday card. I paid term by term, piece by piece. My parents occasionally offered help, but only in ways designed to create witnesses. At Thanksgiving one year, Dad asked loudly in front of Aunt Ruth whether I needed a little something for books. I said, yes, actually. My chemistry materials are $412. His expression changed. I meant if you were in an emergency. The payment is due Monday. Mom cut in. Your father was being kind, Luna. You don't have to turn it into a transaction. I paid for the materials myself. The more I learned to survive without help, the more they used my survival as proof I had never needed any. Adrian, meanwhile, changed his concentration twice. Each change was treated as an act of courage. Dad paid a tuition gap one semester and called it protecting an investment. Mom covered 3 months of his rent and told relatives he was too focused on building his future to worry about small things. When I asked why he couldn't work part-time, Dad said, "Do you want your brother distracted from the opportunity in front of him?" I worked through nearly every semester. Years later, my cousin Hannah told me she remembered a conversation from that time. She had been in the hallway outside the dining room while Mom and Dad talked with Aunt Ruth. According to Hannah, Aunt Ruth had asked whether taking money from my fund was fair. Mom said, "Luna will survive. She always does." Dad said, "Exactly. Adrian needs the runway. She doesn't." Hannah didn't tell me then. She was younger, nervous, and had no proof beyond what she heard. At the time, neither did I. I graduated with strong grades and less debt than I could have had, though still more than I should have carried. My parents attended the ceremony. Mom brought flowers from a grocery store and removed the price sticker in front of me. Afterward, we went to lunch. Adrian was late and arrived wearing sunglasses indoors. Dad spent most of the meal talking about Adrian's next step. When the check came, Mom patted my hand. "See? It worked out," she said. "You were always our practical one." I looked at her. "That's what you're saying about my graduation? What do you want me to say?" "I don't know. Maybe that you're proud of me." She glanced around the table, embarrassed by the directness. "Of course we're proud. Just don't make this into something everyone owes you applause for." Dad nodded. "Plenty of people graduate." Then Adrian lifted his drink and said, "To Luna, who somehow made college look like a hostage negotiation." Everyone laughed. I did too, because I hadn't yet learned that laughing along only helped people pretend the knife was a joke. After graduation, I kept my distance without making an announcement about it. I answered fewer calls. I stopped asking my parents for explanations. I stopped telling them about financial decisions they would only criticize. That should have brought peace. Instead, my independence became another offense. Mom would call and say, "We never hear from you unless we reach out." If I reminded her that she had canceled our last 2 lunches because Adrian needed something, she would say, "There you go, keeping score again." Dad told relatives I was resentful because Adrian had become successful while I was still finding reasons to blame the family. The strange thing was that I wasn't obsessed with Adrian. I didn't spend my days comparing our lives. I mostly wanted my name left out of his story. My parents couldn't do that. Every accomplishment of his became proof they had made the right sacrifices. Every boundary of mine became proof that some children were ungrateful. Then Adrian got engaged to Maya. Maya was 34, calm, observant, and far less interested in family theater than my parents realized. We weren't close, but she had always been polite to me without performing concern. She asked direct questions. She remembered answers. When someone changed a story, her face didn't react much, but her eyes did. That should have warned Adrian. The engagement dinner was held in a rented private dining room with a long table, too many candles, and a photo display near the entrance. Most of the framed pictures were of Adrian. His graduation, his childhood sports teams, his first car, and several family holidays where I appeared at the edge or not at all. There were a few photos of Maya, mostly from trips and birthdays. One picture showed her and Adrian holding champagne glasses after he proposed. Near Maya's seat was a thick wedding planning envelope with catering estimates, guest counts, and deposit reminders clipped together. Mom had already volunteered to help coordinate, which usually meant she made decisions, told others to pay for them, and later described the entire event as her sacrifice. Before dinner, Adrian pulled me aside near the coat rack. "Tonight is supposed to be easy," he said. "Can we all just be normal?" I looked at him. "What does that mean?" "You know what it means." "No, I don't. It means don't bring up old stuff. Don't make comments about mom and dad. Don't get weird if money comes up." I almost laughed. "Why would money come up at your engagement dinner?" He glanced toward the table. "Dad's giving a toast." That answered the question. "In this family," I said, "normal means everyone protecting you from consequences." His face tightened. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. I haven't done anything. Just keep it that way." I went back to the table. Dinner started smoothly. Aunt Ruth asked Maya about the wedding timeline. Hannah complimented the flowers. Mom kept touching Maya's arm and saying, "Our daughter," despite having known her for less than 2 years. Dad steered every conversation back to Adrian. When an uncle mentioned college expenses for his own son, Dad said, "Education is worth any sacrifice when the child understands what's being given to him." When Maya's mother asked how Adrian had managed school costs, Adrian said, "I worked it out. I never wanted to depend on anyone." Mom smiled so proudly I nearly choked on my water. I didn't correct him. I watched. After dessert, Dad stood beside the photo table and tapped his spoon against his glass. Everyone quieted. He held his drink high and looked directly at Adrian. "Some sacrifices are worth it when they produce a son who carries the family name with pride," he said. Mom placed a hand over her heart. Dad continued, "A parent makes hard choices. You invest where you see commitment, character, and loyalty. Adrian is proof that those choices were right." A few relatives murmured agreement. Then Dad looked at me. "Not every child understands that success is more than a transcript." The room shifted. Nothing obvious happened, but people started glancing in my direction. Mom leaned toward Aunt Ruth and said softly, but not softly enough, "Luna gets sensitive when money comes up." I could feel heat rising in my neck. My fingers tightened around the stem of my glass. This was the moment they expected. The look. The comment. The reaction they could use as evidence. So I took a sip of water. Dad smiled like he had one. Then he said, "But tonight is not about old resentments. Tonight is about the future." Maya was watching him differently now. Not angrily, carefully. Dad continued talking about loyalty, family sacrifice, and the loans we carried as a family. It was a vague phrase, the kind he used when he wanted credit without details. I noticed Maya glance at Adrian. Adrian looked down. That was the first moment I understood something was wrong beyond the usual favoritism. After the dinner, people gathered near the photo table and said their goodbyes. Mom was telling Maya's mother that she had already found a reasonable bridal shower venue. Dad was accepting praise for his toast. I was putting on my coat when Maya approached me. "Can I ask you something privately?" Her voice was quiet. We stepped into the hallway outside the dining room. The door swung shut behind us, muting the laughter. Maya folded her arms, then unfolded them. "I'm not accusing you of anything," she said. "I need to ask because something doesn't match." "Okay. Did you ever sign anything for a student loan you didn't use?" For a second I thought I had misheard her. "What? Did you ever co-sign for Adrian? Or sign a loan that was connected to his school expenses?" "No." "Are you sure?" I stared at her. "Why would you ask me that?" She glanced back toward the dining room door. "Adrian and I have been going through basic financial paperwork before marriage. Accounts, debts, old obligations. Your name appeared in a payment record tied to an education loan from his college years. My mouth went dry. What kind of payment record? I didn't see the full file. It was an old statement mixed in with documents his parents gave him. There was a loan reference, an account ending, and your name. I have my own student loans. This one lined up with the semester Adrian attended. I felt the hallway tilt slightly, though I was standing still. What did Adrian say? He said you exaggerate things and that it was handled. Handled. That was his word. I let out a slow breath. Maya continued. He also told me he paid his own way and had almost no school debt. Then your father mentioned family loans in the toast. I'm trying not to jump to conclusions. You shouldn't marry someone while trying not to notice conclusions they keep placing in front of you. She looked at me for a long second. Then she said, I thought you might say that. I didn't confront Adrian that night. I didn't confront my parents. I went home, took off my shoes, and sat at my kitchen table with my laptop. My hands were shaking, but the first thing I did was freeze my credit. The second thing I did was pull my credit reports. I had checked them before, but not with the assumption that my own family might have used my information. That changes how you read a document. An account you once skimmed past because it looked vaguely familiar suddenly becomes a threat. There it was. An education loan I didn't recognize. The original balance wasn't enormous compared to what some people carry, but it was large enough to matter. More importantly, the opening date was during a semester when I had been attending community college and paying my own tuition in installments. The account had gone through periods of deferment and repayment. My parents had apparently made some payments. There had been late marks years earlier, buried among the chaos of my legitimate loans, then later corrections that made the damage less obvious. I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. The next morning I called the loan servicer. The representative asked verification questions and then pulled up the account. I need the original documentation connected to this loan, I said. Are you disputing the account? I may be. I don't recognize it, and I don't believe I signed for it. There was a pause. We can send a copy of the promissory note and the application records. I need certified copies. I can note the request. Please do. The representative explained that records could arrive by mail and appear in my online account. I wrote down her name, the date, the time, and the reference number. My voice sounded calmer than I felt. After the call, I opened the old shoebox where I had kept my school records. It had moved with me more than once. The cardboard softened at the corners. Inside were FAFSA printouts, scholarship award letters, transfer credit evaluations, tuition statements, and bookstore receipts with faded ink. I spread them across the table by semester. Then I searched old emails. My mother never deleted anything because she liked being able to prove what other people had said. She apparently forgot that email worked both ways. I found message after message from my college years. One from me. The bookstore total is higher than expected. Can you help with any part of it? Mom's reply. We can't keep rescuing you every time school costs money. You chose this path. Another from Dad. Your brother has a housing deadline. We need everyone to be realistic about priorities. Another from me. I'm not asking about Adrian. I'm asking whether the money Grandma left for me is still there. Dad's reply. Stop treating family finances like a courtroom. I kept going. Near midnight, I found a forwarded email chain between my parents. It appeared because Mom had accidentally included me years later, when she forwarded a different message from the same thread. The subject line was simply education account. Dad had written, transfer should cover Adrian's spring balance and part of housing. Use the account ending 4421. Mom replied, what if Luna asks for another statement? Dad, tell her the market changed and there is less than expected. Mom, don't tell your sister. She'll make it about herself. That line had been written to Adrian. I read it 3 times. Then I searched the account ending. It matched an old education savings statement I had kept because my name was on it. The transfers lined up with Adrian's tuition dates. They hadn't just spent the fund. They had coordinated the explanation. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a while. The next afternoon I called Hannah. I need you to tell me exactly what you remember about my college fund. I said. She went quiet. Why? Because Maya found something and I found records. What kind of records? A loan in my name. Then she said, I always wondered if something like that happened. What do you mean? She told me about the conversation she had overheard years ago. Mom saying I would survive because I always did. Dad saying Adrian needed the runway and I didn't. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. I was 20. I didn't know what was true. Aunt Celeste made it sound like they were moving money temporarily. And everyone already said you were jealous. I thought if I repeated it without proof, I would make things worse. I wanted to be angry with her, but she sounded ashamed. Do you remember when it happened? She gave me a rough month. It matched the first major transfer. Then she added, there was another conversation after you asked for book money at Thanksgiving. Your mom said they couldn't help you because they had just sent Adrian money. I looked at the receipt from that semester lying on my table. $412. Adrian had received thousands that same month. They made surviving look like consent, I said. Hannah's voice cracked. I'm sorry. Tell the truth if they ask. I will. 2 days later, Maya called. She said she had confronted Adrian privately. I asked him why your name appeared in the records, she said. What did he say? At first, he said you had agreed to help. I didn't. I know. Then he said he was young and didn't understand the paperwork. How young? 22. I laughed once without humor. Old enough to know my name wasn't his. He said your parents handled everything. That part is probably true. I asked him whether he knew money from your education account had been used for him. And he said he knew they had made adjustments. Adjustments? Yes. I could hear the fatigue in her voice. He kept saying it was years ago, Maya continued. He said you had graduated, so there was no real harm. I looked at the credit report on my table. There was harm. I told him that. What did he say? He asked why I was taking your side. That sounded exactly like Adrian. Any fact that didn't benefit him became someone choosing against him. Maya paused. I need you to know something else, she said. He showed me a message from your mother. She told him not to discuss old family finances with me, because you were looking for a way to embarrass him. I hadn't spoken to her. I know. That night Mom called 3 times. I let it go to voicemail. The first message was gentle. Luna, sweetheart, Maya seems confused about some old paperwork. Please call me before this becomes bigger than it is. The second was sharper. Your brother is supposed to be celebrating. You need to stop feeding Maya your version of the past. The third was emotional. After everything I gave up, I can't believe you would do this to our family. She didn't say the loan wasn't real. She didn't ask whether my credit had been harmed. She didn't apologize. Dad sent one text. Family handles family privately. Do not threaten Adrian's future over a paperwork issue. I took a screenshot. Then I remembered an old voicemail. Years earlier, when I had asked Dad again about the education account, he called while I was in class. I had saved the message because his words felt important, though at the time I didn't fully understand why. The voicemail had transferred through phone backups. I searched my cloud storage and found the audio file. Dad's voice filled my kitchen. Luna, I'm not going back and forth about this. We borrowed from your future because Adrian needed it more. You landed on your feet. That should be the end of it. Stop punishing this family for making a hard choice. I sat very still. Borrowed from your future. The phrase was too specific to be accidental. When the certified loan documents arrived, the envelope looked ordinary. White paper. Clear window. My name printed correctly. I opened it at the table. The promissory note listed my personal information, my social security number, my date of birth, an address I had lived at with my parents, and a signature that was supposed to be mine. It was not. Whoever had signed it had tried to imitate the long loop in my L, but they had written my last name in the blocky style my father used on checks. The loan proceeds had been disbursed during the same period as Adrian's tuition gap and housing charges. I compared the documents to my own tuition statements. I compared the account numbers to the old email. I compared the transfer dates to the education savings statements. The timeline was clean. My college fund was depleted. My parents told me there was nothing left. A loan appeared under my information. Money moved toward Adrian's expenses. My parents made some payments, but the account remained tied to me. Adrian benefited and later told Maya he had paid his own way. I didn't need every ugly memory. I needed the facts that couldn't be explained away. So I prepared a short packet. A one-page timeline. A credit report excerpt. The loan servicer letter. A certified copy of the promissory note. The email where Mom wrote, "Don't tell your sister. She'll make it about herself." A transcript of Dad's voicemail, with the audio file saved separately. Bank statements showing transfers from the education account toward Adrian-related expenses. A screenshot of Adrian telling Maya I paid my own way. My parents helped a little, but there is no hidden debt. A copy of the dispute letter I was preparing to send. I also placed a fraud alert on my credit and kept the freeze active. Then I gave Maya a copy. Not because I wanted her to leave Adrian for me. Not because I expected her to become my ally. She was making a legal and financial decision about marriage. She deserved informed consent. She read the packet quietly at my table. When she reached the promissory note, she looked up. "This is not your signature?" "No." "You're certain?" "I know how I sign my own name." She nodded and kept reading. At the end, she closed the packet. "I can forgive debt," she said. "I can't build a marriage on concealed debt and forged consent." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to require complete financial disclosure. From Adrian. Not from his parents. From him." "That sounds reasonable." "He will not think so." "No." She looked at me. "Why didn't you confront them the moment you found this?" "Because they have spent years calling every reaction proof that I'm unstable. I wanted documents before volume." Maya gave a tired half-smile. "I wish Adrian understood that calm is not the same thing as harmless. He learned from people who think silence means permission." 3 days later, Dad called from Mom's phone. I answered because I wanted to hear what they would say now that they knew I had records. "Your mother is beside herself," he began. "Does she plan to answer whether she knew about the loan?" "This is exactly the tone I'm talking about." "What tone?" "Interrogation." "Did you use my information to open an education loan?" "We made financial arrangements for the family." "That's not an answer. You always did know how to make things sound uglier than they were. Forgery tends to sound ugly." He went quiet. Then he said, "Do not use legal language you don't understand. I understand that I didn't sign the promissory note. We made hard choices. Parents do that. Parents don't get to sign their adult daughter's name. You benefited from the family too." "How?" "You had a home, food, education. I was your child. And Adrian was your brother." There it was. As if being related to him had made my identity communal property. Dad lowered his voice. "If you continue this, you may destroy his engagement. If paperwork can destroy it, the problem is not the paperwork. You can't stand seeing him happy. No. You can't stand seeing me informed." He hung up. The next morning, Aunt Ruth texted me. "Your father says Maya's questioning the wedding because you are dredging up old tuition arguments. This is not the time." I replied with one sentence. "Ask him whether he put debt in my name." She didn't answer for several hours. Then she wrote, "He says it was a family loan." I replied, "I never signed it." After that, silence. The family gathering happened the following Sunday. Mom called it a clearing of the air. Dad called it a necessary conversation. Adrian called it an intervention when he texted Hannah. They invited Aunt Ruth, 2 uncles, Hannah, Maya, and a few relatives who had been at the engagement dinner. My parents wanted witnesses because they believed witnesses belonged to whoever spoke first. I almost declined. Then Mom left a voicemail. "You embarrassed your brother in front of his fiancée. You owe him and Maya an apology before this goes any further. We are giving you a chance to make this right with the family present." That decided it. They were making the accusation public. I would make the answer public too. When I arrived, everyone was gathered around my parents' dining table. Coffee had been poured. A plate of pastries sat untouched. Mom had placed tissues beside her chair before the conversation started. That detail told me exactly how she expected the afternoon to go. Adrian sat next to Maya, though there was space between them. He looked exhausted and angry. Maya wore the engagement ring, but her hands were folded in her lap. Dad remained standing at the head of the table. "Now that everyone is here," he said, "we can handle this like adults." I took a seat across from Adrian. Dad continued, "Luna has taken old family decisions and twisted them into an attack on her brother's relationship." "That is not what happened," Maya said. Dad held up a hand. "Please, let me finish." Maya's expression went flat. Mom dabbed at her eyes, though she hadn't cried yet. "We made sacrifices for both our children," Dad said. "Not always equal because children don't have equal needs. Luna has never accepted that." Aunt Ruth looked at me. "Is this about the college fund?" "It's about more than that." Mom leaned forward. "You see," she said, "nothing is ever enough. We admit we use some education savings differently than planned. Luna graduated. She is fine. Adrian is trying to build something beautiful, and she can't stand it." Adrian shook his head. "You couldn't let me have one good thing," he said. I looked at him. "Did you tell Maya you paid your own way?" His jaw tightened. "I worked hard." "That wasn't my question. This is what you do. You turn everything into a trial." Dad pointed at me. "You owe your brother and Maya an apology before this goes any further." "For what?" "For creating suspicion." Maya spoke again. "The documents created suspicion." Mom turned to her. "Sweetheart, you don't understand the history. Luna has always been sensitive about money." "I understand the documents," Maya said. Adrian looked at me. "Grow up, Luna." Mom and Dad did what they had to do. That was when I placed the sealed envelope on the table. It made almost no sound. Everyone looked at it. I rested my hands beside it. "You told everyone I was bitter because I didn't get special treatment," I said. "So let's talk about what I actually didn't get. My college fund, my signature, and the truth." Mom's face changed. Dad said, "Do not perform." "I'm not performing." I opened the envelope and removed the one-page timeline. "This starts with the education savings account. Here are the balances, the dates, and the transfers. Money left the account during Adrian's tuition and housing deadlines." I passed copies to Aunt Ruth and the relatives closest to her. Dad didn't reach for one. "Those were family funds," he said. "The account was designated for my education, including money left to me by Grandma. We managed it as your parents. You emptied it and told me there was nothing left after the deadline was already approaching." Mom's voice trembled. "We knew you would find a way. That doesn't make it consent." I placed the credit report excerpt on the table. This account appeared under my identifying information. I did not recognize it. Then the loan servicer letter. I requested the original documentation. Then the promissory note. This signature is not mine. Aunt Ruth pulled the page closer. Dad finally moved. He reached toward the packet, but I put my hand on it. "You can have a copy after everyone sees it." His face darkened. "This family doesn't air private matters at a dinner table. You made it public when you used relatives as witnesses against me." Mom began crying. "After everything I gave up, this is how you repay me?" I looked at her. "Did you know I hadn't signed the loan?" She covered her mouth. "Celeste," Aunt Ruth said, "answer her." Mom shook her head as if the question itself was cruel. "I was trying to hold this family together." "That is not an answer," Maya said. I placed the old email on the table. "This is Mom telling Adrian, don't tell your sister. She'll make it about herself." Adrian grabbed the page. "That email is out of context." "What context makes it acceptable?" Maya asked. "It was about financial stress. It was about hiding her own education account from her." Adrian turned to me. "You act like I personally sat there and signed your name." "I act like you knew enough to lie." "I didn't know every detail." "You knew my money paid your expenses." He looked away. "You knew my name was connected to a loan." His silence answered before he did. I knew Mom and Dad had arranged something, he said. I thought they were handling payments. And when Maya asked, I didn't want to drag her into old family drama. Maya's voice was quiet. You told me Luna agreed. Adrian looked at her. That's what I understood. No, I said. That is what you needed to be true. Dad struck the table with his palm. Enough. Adrian was young. We made the decisions. Aunt Ruth looked up from the promissory note. Did you put debt in your daughter's name? Dad exhaled sharply. It was temporary. Did you put debt in her name? We intended to pay it. That is not what she asked, one of my uncles said. Dad glared at him. Aunt Ruth didn't look away. Robert, answer the question. Dad's face reddened. We used the information available to protect both children's futures. I almost admired the sentence. It said everything except the truth. You borrowed from my future because Adrian needed it more, I said. Dad's eyes snapped toward me. I removed the voicemail transcript. Those were your exact words. He stared at the page. Then he said, a voicemail is not a legal document. No. The forged promissory note is. Mom's crying became louder. I can't believe you saved a message from your own father to use against him. I saved it because no one in this family remembers the truth once it becomes inconvenient. Hannah, who had been silent until then, spoke. Luna is not making this up. Mom looked at her. Hannah, stay out of this. No. Her voice shook, but she continued. I heard you say Luna would survive without the fund because she always did. I heard Uncle Robert say Adrian needed the runway. And after you told Luna there was no money for books, you sent Adrian money. That was not your business, Mom said. You talked about it in front of half the family. Mom turned toward Aunt Ruth. You remember how difficult Luna was back then. Aunt Ruth's expression hardened. I remember what you told me. I believed you. She looked at me. I thought Luna was being harsh. I was wrong. Dad pushed his chair back. This is becoming a spectacle. No, Maya said. This is becoming clear. Adrian turned to her. You're really going to let her do this to us? Maya looked at him for several seconds. Luna did not create those records. She wants you to hate me. I haven't heard her say what she wants me to do. Adrian pointed at the papers. She brought a case file to my parents' house. Because your parents demanded a public apology. This could have been handled privately. I looked at him. You called me jealous in front of relatives. Aunt Ruth cut in. Jealous of what? The debt you let her carry. The room went completely silent. Adrian's face went pale. For the first time in my life, someone in the family had challenged the premise instead of asking me to soften my reaction. Dad looked at Aunt Ruth. You are taking this too far. No, she said. You took it too far when you used her name. Mom reached for my hand across the table. I moved mine away. Luna, she said, please. We can fix this. We can make payments. That is not enough. What do you want from us? Responsibility. We are offering to pay. You are offering because I have documents. Her face crumpled. I am your mother. Yes. The word sat between us. Being my mother had given her responsibility, not immunity. Maya slowly removed the engagement ring. Adrian watched her hand. Don't, he said. She placed the ring on the table beside the wedding planning envelope. It wasn't theatrical. She didn't push back her chair or make a speech. She simply set it down. I'm not marrying into a financial story that changes every time someone brings paperwork, she said. Adrian stared at her. You're really doing this because of her? Maya shook her head. No. I'm doing this because of you. Maya, I told you I didn't sign anything. You lied about paying your own way. I did pay some of it. You told me Luna agreed. I thought she did. You called a forged loan handled. My parents said they were paying it. And when you learned Luna never consented, your first concern was whether she would embarrass you. Adrian leaned back, breathing hard. So what? We're done. The engagement is paused. Mom made a broken sound. Maya continued, still looking at Adrian. I want full financial disclosure. Every account. Every debt. Every obligation. I want to know what you knew and when you knew it. Then I will decide whether there is still a relationship to continue. Dad stepped in immediately. This is an overreaction. Maya turned toward him. I was about to legally join this family. Private ended when debt and lies entered the marriage. Dad opened his mouth. She raised one hand. I am not discussing my decision with you. That shut him up more effectively than any yelling could have. I gathered the remaining documents into neat stacks. Here is what happens next, I said. Dad laughed bitterly. Of course you have demands. I have boundaries. I looked at him first. I am disputing the loan. You and Mom will take responsibility for anything opened or signed without my consent. If the servicer requires a fraud report, I will file one. I am not protecting you from the consequences of using my identity. Mom whispered. You would report your own parents? You would use your own daughter's identity? She looked away. I turned to Adrian. If you want any continued relationship with me, you tell the truth when this comes up. No more saying I agreed. No more calling me jealous. No more pretending you paid your own way. He crossed his arms. You're holding contact hostage. No. I'm refusing contact built on lies. Then I looked at both my parents. I will not contribute to wedding expenses, bridal showers, travel, gifts, deposits, or family emergencies created by protecting Adrian's image. I will not help explain this to relatives. I will not attend another gathering where I am expected to sit quietly while you rewrite my life. Dad's mouth tightened. You think these papers make you powerful? No. They make me documented. Mom started crying again. You were always stronger than your brother. I felt something in me settle. That was never praise. It was permission to hurt me. No one spoke. I put my copy of the packet back into the envelope. I worked too hard to escape being the family sacrifice. I'm not crawling back into that role so Adrian can look clean in a suit. Then I left. My phone began ringing before I reached my car. I turned it off. The family reaction divided almost exactly the way I expected. Aunt Ruth called the next day and apologized without adding excuses. I believed your parents because they sounded certain, she said. You stayed quiet, and I mistook that for not having an answer. I didn't have documents then. You shouldn't have needed them for us to treat you fairly. That was the first apology from a relative that actually helped. Hannah sent me a message saying she would provide a written statement about what she remembered if the loan servicer needed it. One uncle called Dad's actions a serious violation and told him to stop using the phrase paperwork issue. Another relative texted me that I had been right about the loan but wrong about the timing. This should have been handled privately, she wrote. There was no reason to humiliate Adrian in front of everyone. I replied. They called me jealous in front of everyone and demanded a public apology. She didn't answer. A family friend said Maya was cruel for removing the ring at the table. A cousin responded, private? They were about to let her marry a man who lied about debt. Mom left 7 voicemails in 4 days. None contained the words I am sorry. The first said, we only wanted what was best for the family. The second said, your father can't sleep. The fourth said, Maya's mother is asking questions and this is humiliating. The fifth said, you have made your point. The sixth said, how long are you going to punish us? The seventh said, call me before lawyers get involved. That was the problem. Even after everything, when my mother said family, she didn't mean me. She meant the people affected by my refusal to keep absorbing the harm. Dad sent a letter by certified mail. It described the loan as a misunderstanding caused by complicated education financing. He offered to assume the remaining payments if I agreed not to file a fraud report, and signed a statement saying the account had been opened for family educational purposes. I didn't sign it. Instead, I sent my dispute letter to the loan servicer by certified mail with copies of the promissory note, my identification, signature samples, the timeline, and the supporting records. I included a statement that I had not authorized the account. I kept the tracking receipt. I also spoke with a consumer attorney about the next steps and what documentation to preserve. The dispute wasn't resolved overnight. I never expected it to be. Real consequences usually arrive through envelopes, deadlines, calls, and forms, not one dramatic scene. But the process had started on my terms. Dad eventually stopped calling the loan a misunderstanding. He started calling it an arrangement that should have been explained better. Mom said she had assumed Dad had permission. Then an old email surfaced where she had written, "If Luna sees the application, she'll refuse." After that, she said she had been afraid of losing the house if they didn't help Adrian. The records didn't support that either. Every explanation changed except the one fact that mattered. They had known I did not consent. Adrian's engagement remained paused. Maya did not become my best friend. She didn't call me every day or invite me into every private conversation. She did what I respected most. She kept the issue where it belonged. With Adrian, she required him to produce a complete financial picture. That process uncovered other omissions, not forged accounts in my name, but credit card balances he had minimized, money my parents had given him and later described as loans, and wedding costs he had assumed Maya would cover once deposits were due. Adrian called me once. I answered. "You happy now?" he asked. "No. Maya doesn't trust me." "That is between you and Maya. You gave her everything." "I gave her documents about a loan in my name. You knew what it would do." "I knew what your lie was doing." He was quiet. Then he said, "I didn't ask Mom and Dad to sign your name. Did you give the money back when you learned where it came from?" "I didn't have it." "Did you tell me?" "No." "Did you tell Maya the truth?" "I was going to." "When?" He didn't answer. I continued. "You keep focusing on the moment people found out because that is the only part that hurt you. I lived with the rest of it. That's not fair." "No, it isn't." He hung up. For a few weeks, my parents tried to recruit relatives to pressure me. They told people I was threatening them with criminal charges over a loan they had always intended to pay. They said I had destroyed a wedding plan over old sibling resentment. That version worked on fewer people once the documents had circulated. Aunt Ruth stopped them at a family lunch when Dad called me vindictive. "You are still talking about her reaction," she said. "Talk about your action." Hannah corrected Mom when she claimed the education fund had never been promised to me. "I saw statements with Luna's name," she said. "One of my uncles refused to contribute to Adrian's wedding expenses until the loan issue was resolved." The social center of the family shifted. Not completely. Families like mine don't transform because truth appears. Some people will always prefer the explanation that lets dinner remain comfortable. But my parents lost control of the story. That mattered. I stopped answering guilt calls. I told Mom in writing that I would only discuss the issue if she included concrete repayment steps, acknowledgement that I hadn't consented, and cooperation with the loan dispute. Her next message said, "I can't talk to you when you are this cold." I didn't respond. Dad tried one final time to appeal to legacy. "You are permanently damaging the family name," he said. I replied, "You used mine first." After that, I blocked him for a while. The greatest change was quieter than the engagement scene. I stopped explaining myself to people committed to misunderstanding me. When a relative said, "But they are still your parents," I said, "Yes, which is why they should have protected my identity." When someone said, "Adrian was young," I said, "He is 36 now." When someone said, "Maya may still marry him," I said, "That is her decision." Because Maya's choice was never the measure of my victory. The win was not the ring on the table. The win was that my father could no longer toast himself as a noble parent without someone remembering the forged signature. The win was that my mother could no longer call me sensitive about money without Aunt Ruth asking which money she meant. The win was that Adrian could no longer describe himself as self-made without confronting who had been used to make him. Most of all, the win was that my silence could no longer be presented as proof that nothing happened. Months later, the loan dispute was still moving through review, but the account was formally flagged. Collection activity connected to the disputed portion had stopped, and my parents had been required to provide records. The remaining balance was no longer something they could quietly leave under my name, while telling everyone it had been handled. I kept every letter. Not in the old shoebox this time. In a small fireproof case with the certified mail receipts, the promissory note, the voicemail file, and the timeline. Mom still sends messages on holidays. They usually begin with, "Families should not stay divided over money." I don't argue. This was never only about money. It was about consent. It was about being told I was strong whenever someone wanted me to accept less. It was about being praised for independence until I became independent enough to say no. My parents believed they could decide what my future was worth, borrow against it, and then use my survival to erase the damage. They were wrong. I didn't ruin my brother's engagement. I ruined the lie my family had been living off for years. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.